everybody, and welcome back to London Blue Presents The Art of Self-Care. Okay, now we left off on talking about the last question on physical health was, did you have any tips or advice for people who were maybe weight loss or suffering arthritis or illnesses or trying to break habits or trying to fight addictions? Are there any supplements, exercises, tips, or tricks that somebody could have that you could advise somebody to help with that? And Liv, I think we left off on you. Can you pick that up?
Sure. Just to backtrack a little bit, I was going to tell Bonnie that with the condition that you have and the inflammation because of tomatoes, you might have already checked into this, but you might want to check nightshades, which would also include potatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Tomatoes are a nightshade, and usually people with neurological conditions or severe inflammation, nightshades can really aggravate that. It can start as indigestion and you think that that's normal, but then it turn into some other things. So you might want to check that if you haven't already. Also, so back on the topic of like the supplements and addictions, breaking habits, arthritis, one little piece I'd like to give is that if anything ends in the word itis, that means inflammation. And so arthritis is really inflammation of the joints. And lots of times, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because we hear that we have arthritis, that if you have rheumatoid, it can feel like a death sentence. It can feel like you literally are not ever going to be able to escape that. And the biggest thing to pay attention to is that it's itis, so it's an inflammation. So we want to uninflame the body, which can be done through food. It can be done through supplementation. But one of the biggest things to piggyback off of what Stephanie said is everybody in America has a magnesium deficiency. No one gets enough magnesium. And she's absolutely right with multivitamins. They're cool, but you really want to take full servings of that specific mineral. And you want those to be able to assimilate and be absorbed into the body. Without magnesium, you cannot do that. And so one little thing that I've learned through my own study and research is that with magnesium, you're drinking water every day, right? What's the two biggest complaints that everybody says about drinking water? Number one, I have to pee so much, or my extremities swell. And the reason that that's happening is because on a cellular level, your body is not putting that water into the cell. You want the water to go into the cell. You don't just want it to go into the body and be peed back out or released as waste. You want it to go into the cell. And so magnesium helps with this. One really easy way to do this is to take a Celtic salt crystal and put it on your tongue before you drink water, every time you drink water. Or you can take a supplement, this is a lot simpler, of magnesium oxide, not citrate, that's a laxative. You want to take oxide, which will also help you if you're constipated, and it will help you if you have diarrhea because it'll put you right in the middle at a really good bowel movement. But that magnesium is needed for every single cellular process in your body. You want to blink your eyes, you need magnesium. You want to move your hands, you need magnesium. You want your cells to actually divide. So let's say you get a boo-boo and you scrape the skin and you now want that skin to regenerate, you need magnesium for that process. So I highly recommend at least 300 milligrams of magnesium oxide. Douglas Labs is a great brand. I also have a dispensary if anybody needs that or be interested in that. We can talk about that at the end with links to get quality supplements like that. One of the biggest things that I see, especially with arthritis, is the way people eat, the way people drink, that magnesium deficiency. If that water's not getting into the cell, you're not really going to be hydrated. You're going to stay dehydrated, which is going to cause inflammation. If that magnesium's not there, you're not going to assimilate or absorb your nutrients. So then you're not going to get what you need to go into the body. And you're going to constantly have this cycle or hamster wheel of inflammation. And so we want to rid the body of any type of inflammation that it has. Also, super acidic foods like sugar and different things like that. They will cause the body to remain in an amplified inflammatory state, and it just doesn't breed good in the insides for your body to function the way that it's supposed to. So if we're going to talk a little bit about and move over to breaking habits or addiction, I'm not someone that wants to take someone that's come especially out of an addiction background and put them on 500 different supplements, because first of all, anyone that does this, we're not going to know what supplements worked. It's very difficult to figure that out. It's just like taking 15 different medications. If you start them all at once, you don't know which one actually helps the condition that you have. And so we don't want to go on our, supplement website and order 25 different things to start taking them. We really want to start with something like a pH test of the urine and the saliva to see where you're at, to see if you're alkaline or acidic, to see if you're a combination of both, to figure out what types of things that you need. And somebody that's coming out of active addiction is really going to be in a very inflammatory state anyway, because we've just put literal poison in the body for probably years. And not only are we breaking a habit and we're breaking a cycle, we're having to renew the whole body experience from the inside out if we're breaking addiction. Breaking habits, lots of times you hear people say, just do it, or, you've got this, you got it. And it goes way past that, because breaking habits, even something as simple as overeating, is something that you have done over time again and again and again and again. And it's a mental battle more than it is anything else. That nutritional aspect and that spiritual aspect then become tools or resources that you use to help you as you're breaking habits. But you have to get the mindset down before you get anything else, in my professional opinion. And so breaking habits, there are tools out there that can help you, like trackers to track what you're doing to make you more cognizant or aware of what you're putting in your body, what you're doing, how you're doing it. But at the end of the day, I'm a good old fashioned therapy person. And I think that that's where you should start, because breaking habits isn't easy. And sometimes people do not have the ability to do that on their own. And I think lots of times when we go into the whole breaking habits and breaking addictions, we go into that with this thought process that I'm alone. Sometimes we don't want people to know that it's something that we've gone through, or we're just so tired of dealing what we're dealing with that we finally break down and ask for the help, but maybe we're not, super excited to take it because we felt like we've been alone the whole time. So I highly suggest getting someone, whether that be in program, whether that be therapy, whether that be a life coach, whether that be just a friend to help hold your hand as you go through the process, because that isn't something that we're meant to go through alone. When we're coming out of breaking habits too, one of the biggest things that I see, especially with my clients, is people will still function in the arenas that they were in when they were making those habits. You have to pull yourself out of those. That's one of the hardest things to do, but it's true. It's very difficult to continue to place yourself in a position or an area that's going to tempt you to continue to do the thing that you're wanting to stop. If you've already said out loud, or even to yourself, I want to stop doing this thing, now you've admitted that you're doing it. Now you're admitting that you want to move forward. So you have to give yourself a boost in order to be able to do that. I'll be honest, I haven't done a lot of work through this type of work with people that are in active addiction. Honestly, I don't know that supplement world honestly would be best, because if someone is coming out of active addiction, we don't want to replace one addiction for another. So for instance, if you find this really great thing that gives you energy and it's wonderful and it pumps you up, you're coming out of that active addiction, and then you move over to a supplement that makes you feel wonderful, now we're overdoing it on that supplement. Or now we're taking a supplement that's helping us have the energy and making us feel good. But what happens when you crash from that? What happens when that comes down? What happens when that supplement leaves your body and then you have to take it again? And so you just have to be very careful, I believe, if you're someone that's dealing with this. And addictions don't have to be big, scary things like drugs. Addiction can be things that honestly are simple. It can be TV, it can be sugar, it can be food. It can also be people.
Coffee. Coffee.
Coffee. I wasn't going to go there, but okay, coffee. Yes, coffee. And so it's, we really just have to look at it as though I think every person in the world probably has a vice. And so moderation is key. Again, you don't have to quit coffee. We just want to be in balance with the coffee. You don't have to quit watching TV, but we don't want to be that to be something we're doing all day. We don't have to quit video games, but we don't want that to take precedence over our responsibilities. And so I guess that's where I come from when we're talking about habits, breaking those, and especially for negative habits and addictions. And then again, inflammation in the body. My top 5 supplements for anybody that's in an inflammatory state is to check your food first, but obviously magnesium, a probiotic, C-Cal Mag powder. It's vitamin C, magnesium oxide, and calcium bicarbonate all together to help buffer and balance your pH. And then you might want to look into a couple other things, especially if you're a woman, such as DIM 1 through C or chasteberry, because those are things that detoxify the liver and the kidneys. And I will give you a little secret about coffee and caffeine for women. Caffeine is number one thing that pushes women into estrogen dominance. So even if you have been through menopause already or you're perimenopausal, estrogen can still be an issue for you. And so if we're constantly pumping our body full of things that make estrogen stimulation for us, what happens is estrogen gets pushed out like a byproduct as waste after we've used what we need from it. And so it'll get like tacky and sticky and it sticks to the inside of your liver and your kidneys. And after a while, it'll back up and it just backs up and backs up and backs up. And this is what creates estrogen dominance, which then creates hormone imbalance, which then creates raised cortisol levels, which then creates a whole plethora of other issues. If you're somebody of childbearing age, you're going to find things like diabetes, thyroid disorders, you're going to find endometriosis, PCOS, the list is endless. And this is mainly what I work with my clients on a daily basis. So we just want to be mindful when we're putting things in our body like caffeine or dairy because it's very harsh on a woman's system. It's just the way we're built. I'm sorry. It's all of us. It's not just one of us. And so that's just something to keep in mind. But inflammation is definitely where it starts. And that's where you really want to work if you want to see a difference in your body.
Okay, great answers. And you mentioned menopause. Do you guys have tips for women entering menopause or coming out of menopause? Do you have any tips to help? I mean, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's not just physical. I mean, and this was going to bring us on into the our mental aspect, our mental self-care. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing your body changing, you can no longer have children, you can no longer do this or whatever. And that can take a mental toll on a woman as well. As far as seeing the aging skin in a society where everybody's supposed to be perfect and beautiful. So do you have tips for women facing those issues?
Something that I really would love to change about society, and maybe it starts with me, maybe it starts with my programs, maybe it starts with the way that I treat other women. But number one is the fact that women, especially in travel cultures that are at that age of menopause, they should be revered. You guys are wisdom. You're not something that gets thrown out like garbage. You literally are the people that lead the tribe. You've been through life. It's almost like when you start your period, that's the coming of age of you becoming a woman. Well, when you start menopause, that's the coming of age of you becoming the silver haired. Everybody goes to you because you've lived enough life to be able to tell everybody what to do. And I think there's just this stigma on menopause that already makes women feel so self conscious, and that really isn't the way that it should be. We've kind of got it backwards. And those are the women that should be teaching us and training us and helping us if we're of childbearing age. I personally have been perimenopausal since I had my second child. I went ahead and got a tubal ligation because I had a very tumultuous pregnancy, and it's not a good idea for me to have any more babies for my life. And so I've had hot flashes the whole nine, and I get to endure this until my body decides that it doesn't want to have periods anymore. So I don't know how many years that's going to be. One of the biggest things that I love herbally is black cohosh because it helps both women that are perimenopausal and women that are menopausal. It helps with hot flashes. Very bitter, kind of nasty, but it's worth it, especially when you're having a personal summer and you've got to sleep with the window open and the fan on in January. And so that's one big thing. But my biggest thing is just changing that stigma on menopause. Like it's just another phase of life that makes you even more beautiful. It doesn't mean that you're done. It doesn't mean that you're dried up. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. You're still beautiful. You're still wonderful. You're still amazing. And despite the symptoms, this is a whole new lease on life for a lot of women where we people say, oh, now, you get your stride like in your 40s. No, I think like that 50, 60 range where people are like, I'm still hot and I still love myself with that whole divine feminine energy that comes in when you're in your 40s and you push that over to the 50s and 60s and still enjoy life. Like to me, there is nothing like a hot granny who's like, yes, I still got it. Like that's a beautiful thing. And menopause does not phase her. And so I just wish that we could change the way we view it. But herbally and supplement wise, ashwagandha is great. Black cohosh is great. DIM13C is great. Anything that's going to balance the hormone level of women and keep estrogen, especially if it's low for menopause, where you need it in order to function properly. Obviously, we can go the route of like gels and actual creams on the skin. Some people don't like to go that far, They just like to go through the menopause and be done and get it over with. So there's a lot of different avenues that you can go with menopause. It doesn't look the same for each person. The picture is very different. It's basically just what you feel comfortable with on how you want to kind of revamp your life when you get to that point.
Bonnie, you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. Dr. Liv, wow, that was just like beautiful. Number one, like just the kind of like dedication that you have to kind of changing that narrative is like all of what I'm about as well. So thank you. Like, um, it it is. It's a journey, and I know that my teacher talks about it in our women's circles, and I know that, I personally might not be close to it yet, but I'm witnessing other women like in reflection of me in these circles. And what I know and have witnessed is that it is this journey from, the maiden to the wise woman. And so you're really like looking at it as this kind of journey into, opening up to this potential of who you are as the wise woman. And like Liv said, with teaching, finding where your path is and sharing your wisdom is just so important, because that is, giving you your power in this new chapter of who you're becoming. And what I know has helped a lot of women, and I'm starting to get into this practice myself now, which is already helping, yoni steaming, and taking the time to allow for some really nice herbs in water that's been brought to a boil, and the herbs have been in the water for at least 20 minutes, and taking some time in meditation and prayer, sitting over to allow this steam to come up, can lift and support your hormones. It can support kind of bladder prolapse, different kind of, potential areas where gravity is just working against us. And I have started yoni steaming in the last year, and I've just noticed so much more support as far as like gaining more feeling, like, in my muscles, in my pelvic floor muscles, and being able to, notice a difference in like my bladder retention. And so it's something that you definitely want to research, and you definitely want to potentially work with a practitioner who can kind of walk you through and guide you through it. And just using different herbs, like, for me, I think the first kind of yoni steam that I worked with was ginger, and it actually helped kind of support me in some candida overgrowth, because I drank, a lot of beer. I had some sugar issues with addiction. You cut back on beer and then you're like eating the desserts. So then you have a real problem with candida, and candida overgrowth is something that can just, happen really easily. You just get into a little imbalance. It's something naturally in your body. And yoni steaming with ginger, was the first place I started. And when I noticed like how much more like rich the tissues felt, and I noticed that I didn't feel like I had that kind of pressure of kind of my reproductive organs, kind of, it really does lift, the steam does. And so supporting and nourishing your body at all stages, as a woman, is just so important, because these practices, have been taken out of modern day Western, medicine, in the sense that we lost some of the wisdom from the wise women before us. And now we're kind of trying to bring it back in.
Okay, yeah. And how do you spell that? So in case somebody is trying to Google it.
Yeah. Yoni,
Can you spell it for me?
Yoni, yoni steaming. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Very good tips. Okay, so again, we're touching more, we're going to get more into the mental health. And I know finding a good balance is key. I know that I hear people all different fields talking about, well, you've got to have balance. You've got to have balance. So my question is, and because our mental health definitely affects our physical well-being. How do we know? How do we find that balance? And how do we know when we're there?
I think that this is another one of those situations, because what's funny about the word balance is mental and physical is also a balance. And I feel like this is another one of those situations where you have to be very in tune with you and let your body tell you what it needs when it needs it. It's very easy to push yourself past the physical limit. It's even easier to push yourself through the mental limit. And as women, you don't have to have kids for this to be the case. Once again, if you're very nurturing, that normally comes naturally to us. We take on all these things, we do all these things, and we push ourselves past our points physically and mentally, most of us every week. It's almost like we don't know how to say no. So that's number one. Let's learn how to say no. I challenge people, especially my clients, to make a list, like a checklist. And every time they say no, it's kind of like a punch card. You write down that you said no. And after so many no's, you get to give yourself a gift because you said no. You finally did it. Learn how to delegate and just be like, I don't have time for this right now. And find out what's important. But mental health is something that I think is a little bit more talked about in the female community. Lots of times men don't feel like they can express themselves in that way. We normally don't have an issue with that, but we also feel like we have to be very strong. And so sometimes the way we go about it pushes us to that point where we push ourselves past that limit that we can really handle. And I think paying attention very closely to overwhelm is a really key factor in this. You're going to know because your body, both mentally and physically, are going to yell when you're in overwhelm. This may, if you are a yeller, this is only going to turn you into that yeller. If you're not a yeller, that's when you're going to start to feel deep anxiety in your chest, panic attacks, things of that nature, because your body's telling you, I'm in overwhelm. I can't take anymore. You push me past this point, we're going to go into overdrive. And it's so important, both mentally and physically, to pay attention. For instance, if you go out and you hike a bunch and you haven't done that in a while, what happens to your muscles? You know immediately, and you really know that next morning when you wake up because you have trouble getting out of the bed the next morning because your muscles are too tired. Maybe you didn't stretch, or maybe you get out there and you run on that track that day with the moms at the track and field practice, and that next day your muscles are screaming because they're now in recovery mode. And what do? You take a pause, you take a rest. We have to do that same thing with our minds. And our mind is precious. We have to protect our mind. And we have to know when we're pushed past those limits and bring ourselves back. Just like you rest your body, you have to rest your mind. And keeping mental health at the forefront and knowing when you can't, that's another thing. I think sometimes we really feel like we can't say I can't because needing someone, especially if you're in a masculine energy or masculine space, needing someone, we don't want to feel like we need someone, but sometimes we do. And we have to know when to ask for help. We have to know that it's okay to say I can't. We have to know that it's okay to take a pause and to take a break.
Yeah, very, very good points. Yeah, Bonnie?
Oh, yeah, the balance. It's like, the scales. We're always kind of like working to find this, balance. But I think like it really just starts like kind of at the root of, accepting where you are in your journey, starting to kind of know your stripes and accept them, like I'll tell anybody who asks, like, my grandmother on my maternal side was an alcoholic. There is no wonder like why I like, love going to alcohol, like for different reasons, for fun, to celebrate, but also to numb. And so just like knowing your stripes, owning them, and being vulnerable enough to say like, hey, I like to go and have a beer every now and again. It's no wonder, it's in my DNA kind of. Like at the same time, there have been times when I have been in those periods of overconsumption, be it with alcohol or food or exercise even. And so, well, not overconsumption of exercise, but over output of exercise. Like, just the more we start to open up, conversations like this where people can, see people being vulnerable, starting to own their stripes and starting to accept parts of who they are, the mental work really is, all about that self-inquiry, seeing where you're at. A tool and resource like physically that's helped, me, and I've seen it help a lot of people. Yin yoga is kind of a different form of yoga in the way that you're coming into these shapes and finding stillness. And so instead of this kind of movement based practice that's like more heavy into the, yoga postures and, getting kind of like the energy going, yin yoga kind of lets you come into the body and be still for a few minutes in a shape. So you're using pillows, you're using, these support systems to hold yourself up in certain shapes. And it really gives you some time to start to like unpack what kind of thoughts are coming up in these shapes. And so if we're in a shape that's kind of opening up your hips, you might notice like, oh, look at all these thoughts that are coming up. I've stored so many emotional experiences in my body, throughout the day or throughout the week. And so we have a tendency to store emotional experiences in the body. And it's really important to allow time for those to come up and to get processed, because a lot of times we try to kind of push through, and escape those emotions. And so, finding balance is really, it's all about finding, that acceptance of yourself where you are and just getting kind of curious, making it fun, making it, like something that's really fun for you to go to, you know, a park and sit down and ask yourself some really like strange questions. Like start to ask yourself questions and journal about it and kind of see where your mind goes in this stream of consciousness. Like, and you'll be surprised. Like there are a lot of subconscious thoughts that are kind of going on underneath, and we're moving so fast we're not really noticing them, but they're there and they're kind of affecting our choices that we're making in the day. And so yeah, I will always say it because I need the reminder: slow down and kind of check in with yourself. Yeah.
That's really good advice. I'm kind of speechless. I'm just taking it all in. You're giving so much cool information and things I've never heard of before. And yeah, that it is an awareness. I mean, we need to start being more aware. We need to start listening to our bodies. Okay, so continuing on mental health. What are some good ways of coping with stress? I know we've kind of hit on this, hit or miss, throughout the whole podcast, so forth, but let's say your top piece of advice for dealing with stress. And I'm not talking about just everyday stress. I mean, let's be dramatic. Let's say something horrible happened or about to happen, and you're just like really panicking type stress. How's that? Give us your best advice to deal with that type of overload, panic. Oh my gosh, I'm about to flip stress.
So one of the things that I really like to do, and I can actually show it to you, I hold a lot of my stress right here and in my neck. It makes me like literally have headaches sometimes, and I usually have to get massage because my traps will get so tight that I literally cannot move. Like there was a period of time in my life, because my life was filled with a lot of trauma for a long time, that I literally walked around like this because I couldn't put my shoulders down. Like I just couldn't. But if you take your fingers and you slide them over to where they stop, and then you massage that portion right there, you're going to feel it because your finger is going to go right in the divot, and you literally push that and massage it until you feel the release in your arm. You'll feel it. It might take a second, but you'll feel it. And then once you feel that release, just slide your hand down your arm and literally release the energy. And it takes a whole weight off your shoulders and also saves you a little bit of money because sometimes massage can be expensive. But still get regular massage. But it's something that has really helped me to release stress. Now, for coping, and we're in those just high octane moments where it just feels like the bottom is falling out, the roof is caving in, you cannot function. Something that is so important, and I can't help but take it back here, is self-awareness. I literally talk through things with myself. I don't care if anybody thinks that that's crazy or I'm crazy. I mean, you're probably not going to see me out in the road just talking to myself, but you get what I'm saying. I literally talk it through with myself. I have to talk myself down off the ledge and be like, Olivia, focus, get it together. What can we deal with right now? What can we put to the side? What is not ours to control or our burden to carry? Anyway, I literally have to break it down into those three categories. And then I rock with what I can do. That helps me a lot to compartmentalize what is going on. Another thing that is uber amazing for me is journaling. I don't care how angry I am. If I write it out in that journal, it takes some of the steam off of that, because sometimes our anger can get the best of us. And when we're in stressful situations, that's normally what you're going to see first is anger. It'll turn into sadness, but we're normally going to see anger because we're having overwhelm. And also, number three, best for me, is to feel my emotions. There was a large period of my life where I didn't feel anything. I would suppress everything, and it made me a very angry, miserable person. I was not a nice person to be around. I didn't like myself at that point, I think, honestly. And I really had to learn how to feel my emotions. We were given those emotions. God gave us those emotions. He gave us those to feel those. He gave us those to understand the human experience. Even though we're spiritual beings having a human experience, we have those emotions. We are meant to feel those. We're not meant to suppress them. We're not meant to push them down. We're not meant to hide them. Especially for women, we are in this world that tells us we're too emotional already. And the thing is, emotion is necessary. Stress manifests in the body. So that exercise that I just showed you, where you slide your fingers over and you do this, the only reason I'm having to do that is because I'm still suppressing my emotions, and my stress is now manifesting in my body. And if it manifests in my neck, and it manifests in my shoulders, and it manifests in my traps, and it makes me tense and I can't function, that's going to then lead to disease of some type. There's not going to be unified harmony in my body. So that's where we get the word disease from. It's dis-ease, or lack of harmony in the body. And now I've made myself susceptible to being sick. I'm automatically lowering my immune system, and I'm causing other problems in my body, all because I'm not using a good coping mechanism. So just to recap, if you are just feeling stressed, go ahead and run that finger over till you find it. Put your finger in the divot and just massage until you feel it release, and then let it go. And then, of course, journaling, making sure that I'm being self-aware, and making sure that I'm feeling my feelings.
Very good tips. And actually, a funny thing is I've always done the shoulder thing too. I'm relaxed and my head will be down between my shoulders. In fact, my stepsister's son made a comment one day. It's been a couple years ago, I think, but he was like, she doesn't look like she has a neck, because I'm literally always just like hunched over or tensed up, and yeah, I've got knots all down, especially like right in here and all down my back. And it's knots. I mean, big knots. And, I'm getting the husband. I'm like, please rub this out. It hurts so bad. But the doctor also told me, I was in a car wreck back when my oldest daughter was a baby, and I was in a car wreck and I had severe whiplash. I caused severe damage to my neck. And I've just recently been told, they just x-rayed it and did an MRI and everything on me again a few years ago. And they said, he told me, he said, your spine, your neck bone actually has a natural curve to it. And that's like an anti-shock. It's kind of like the shocks on your car. It helps. And he's like, you don't have that. Your neck bone is completely straight. And it said it's extremely abnormal. And that's what's causing me a lot of my neck pain. But down in here, it hurts so bad. And yes, between that and my neck, always constantly hurting, I'm always fighting headaches. So, Bonnie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, that was great. Just that self massage, getting to know your body. That's something that, like, I wish I would have had in my life, as a younger child. Like, I came into a lot of like, what I've shared with you just in the last 5 years. Like, so, yeah, if you're in a heightened state of stress, and I'm going to tell you, like, I was a child protective service worker for 2 years. So I was in some very intense situations, and I was having, panic attacks and working through them. I can just say, like, your body keeps the score. It's a really good book that I read that goes over trauma and how it kind of gets stored in the body. And I got to a point after a situation where one of my kids that got put back in the home ended up uh, getting into a situation with gun violence at the age of 6, where he hurt himself, and I had to get out really fast, change jobs. First day at that new job, because it was a state job as well, so I transferred in and I had to work my last day and my first day. The first day, I'm sitting at a desk and I realized, like, I'm having these states of panic just sitting at a cubicle because my body has been so overstimulated and exhausted with emotional experiences, be it through kind of secondary trauma response from other people's emotions and my own in reaction to these situations. And it's going to take time. We spend so much time getting up to a certain point, and so it's going to take time to kind of start to unpackage a lot of that. And so if it's like a chronic situation of stress, where you've been in this like situation where you've had stressful events around a certain person or subject, you just have to kind of be easy with yourself, because it's going to take time to unpack that. And if it's like in the immediate, um, you know, again, like that Brahmari pranayam is so great. It's like a kind of self-stimming practice, the humming, singing. Singing can be so good for you to kind of get out of your head. If you get out of the experience and you're in your car, if you put on some calming, music that you really like, you can start to kind of calm yourself through singing and exploring like sound. You even talked about it earlier, that kind of need to scream if you have to get something out. It's really important to just know that these periods of stress and these heightened reactions, like you're going to have kind of a reaction in the body, and you have to kind of just, be aware that it's there. You're going to have to catch up a little, like on your self-care and your rest, and let yourself come back down out of that trauma state. For me, I spent 2 years in child protective services, and it probably took about 2 years working, in a different job before I realized, like, oh, okay, I think I'm kind of just getting back to that place where I was before. Like, so, the body keeps the score.
Yeah. And honestly, I really didn't realize that. I mean, yeah, I know that we feel stress and we get the tight neck or, tense muscles, but I never really thought about our bodies actually storing that heartache and stress and trauma. I never realized, I never gave it much thought. And you talked about the CPS work. Yeah, I was actually offered 2 different child protective services positions. And honestly, the day I went in for my second interview on the second job proposal was the day they had just reported on the local news where the social worker went to the house to do a health check, and it was the social worker who found a deceased infant in a milk crate. And I'm like, no, I can't. I could not. Number one, they don't pay enough in the state of West Virginia. I'm sorry. I can't.
It's
I
such
don't want to
heavy
see
work.
that.
in this whole kind of theme of the podcast today, like self-care, it's like these are the types of practices, and Dr. Liv and myself and Stephanie are the type of people, that they need people like us supporting those people in situations. You almost need to start creating. I have a lady that I met at the Trauma Informed Leadership Conference. She's created her own job. She's the director of wellness at, a private school. I'm like, I love that. These kind of like traditional institutions need, holistic health, like supporting them. And it's almost like, oh, everybody needs a director of wellness. Like, we need to put a director of wellness in CPS. Like, we need to put a director of wellness in the school. Like, so, yeah. Thank you for opening up the conversation about self-care and yeah, just trying to kind of support this idea that we are the type of people that need to be, helping and supporting, other people.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, and we were talking on mental illness or mental health. Mental illness has such a bad rap that people are afraid to say, hey, I need therapy, or hey, I need help. I can't deal with this. People are afraid to reach out and ask for help because there's such a horrible stigma to mental illness that, oh, well, you got mental illness, I'm not going to hire you, or oh, you've got this issue, I don't want to date you. Or, I mean, there's such a horrible stigma attached to mental illness. People who are just suffering just basic anxiety are afraid to ask for help because they're like, oh, well, I don't want to get categorized as that, or I don't want it on my records, or I don't want this person to find out. We're so terrified to be labeled as having a mental illness that when you are having issues, you're not seeking professional help. And honestly, guys, my daughter was just telling me that she was just showing me the project that she did for one of her classes, and it was the very last project she turned in for high school. And it was literally, she had to pick a current event and talk about it. And she talked about mass shootings. And that falls right into the same categories of mental health. We need to offer mental health, and we need to quit attaching stigmas to it so that people like that aren't afraid to say, hey, I'm about to snap, I need help, Yeah. But Bonnie, you also mentioned being verbal, the humming and singing. Yeah. And really, I can understand that now that you've explained it a little bit more, and I've actually done it, and I could feel the vibrations and feel how cool that felt. I mean, yeah, that's really neat. And really, if you think about it, how do babies calm themselves? They coo, they hum, they they coo, they make noises. And yes, I know a lot of that is them learning language and learning how to communicate, but that's also calming for them. So if it's calming for them, why can't it be calming for us? Right?
When I get into, circles with some of, the kind of like leaders and, trauma informed yoga that I've been under, it's like, we have been kind of held back, from a lot of our kind of like instinct and our intuition. And it's like, sometimes like we'll go into these somatic practices where, we'll just put some music on in the background and you start to kind of like explore movement and sound and what can come up and what a group can come together and do when they're exploring in this way. Like, it can be so supportive as far as like nervous system regulation, because you have this group co-regulating. And so you have some people who are kind of in these states of kind of regulation that end up providing a safe space for some people to explore some of these like really like guttural deep sounds that come out of their body. And being able to kind of like do somatic work like that can be really helpful as far as getting some of the trauma to release out of the body. But at the same time, you don't want to go, too far, too deep to where you kind of like, put yourself into a panic state, because that's possible. So working, with practitioners who, have a teacher and who have like trained, under a certain lineage can be really important to you when you get into that, because, yeah, a lot of people say they do one thing or another, but like, it's really important to just know about somebody, like, and their teacher. And if they talk about their teachers, that's usually like a really good sign too. Just like, as far as like somatic and yoga goes, like it can be really nice to feel like you have that lineage of teacher passing down to student.
Yeah, and there we are talking about community again and being in one accord, which brings us into our spirituality discussions. And we need to treat each other equally, and we need to be nice to each other. We need to quit tearing each other down, and we need to be uplifting one another and helping each other out and congratulating your neighbor when they have a win. Don't try to tear them down or stop them because they're doing something that you want to do or what have you. Uplift them, celebrate their achievements, be there if they fall and they need a shoulder to lean on. Even if they are up here, you can still lean on it. It's still here. I'll still share. Let me go ahead and get into the spirituality of self-care. The first question when it comes to spirituality, I know as a Christian, in my past, I found a lot of peace and calmness in hard situations or stressful situations by just saying a prayer, even if it's just like walking from the car to work or through the house, silent prayer, talking to God. That usually helps at least calm the situation for me down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is this, is that a lot of people don't know God or they don't believe in him. So what are your tips for people in that situation? And is spirituality important to your overall health?
Wow. That's a complicated question, I guess. I mean, I guess, in my opinion, in what I understand, there's only one way, one true way. So when we talk about spirituality, from my perspective, it's more about God. It's about his son. It's about his Holy Spirit. And it's about having him in your heart to basically, because Jesus is known in scripture as the Prince of Peace. And so and having shalom or peace is what he brings into our lives when we know him. So, but as a non-believer, as someone who isn't there, honestly, I mean, honestly, I would like walking, hiking, being out in nature is always calming effect for me, even with prayer in my life. There's not a whole lot I enjoy more than being out in the woods, being out on a hike with my camera, or sitting next to water. Those are all very calming, and I think they are known to even, if it's not a stressful hike, but even sitting by water is calming for your body and your blood pressure. So there are things like that I think, as far as even if you believe in a creator, acknowledging him and not acknowledging the world around us as something that was created, something that was given to us for our pleasure and our peace and stuff like that. So I guess that would be the best answer I could give, as far as the world, the earth, and even, I guess even animals and pets can have a very big calming effect on us, because they tend to be a calmer presence in our life. My dogs are very calm, and no matter how upset I am, if I sit down next to them, it will instantly calm me down in one way or another. So I hope that makes sense.
That is so true. I agree with you 100% by the babbling brook and just being able to run your hands through a soft little puppy dog's fur and get those little kisses and hugs. Yeah, that's definitely very pleasing and calming. Olivia, what's your take on that?
I work with people from all walks of life, and spirituality is a huge part of my online programs and my one-on-one coaching with my clients. I deal a lot with trauma release, and that does include a very large portion of spirituality. And so I try to keep it really like even keel just because I want to be respectful of everyone's belief systems. And so I even practice some of the things that I do with my clients, but a lot of that really involves a lot, like Stephanie said, being one with nature, being outside, taking hikes, gardening. Another big thing for self-care that I really try to help people with, especially with trauma release, is finding a system that works for them. If that's not prayer, then meditation. Guided meditation usually works very well also. And there's several other things that I really think are really good to help, especially women that are suffering from burnout and possibly just being fatigued from doing too many things. And that's just to find a nice quiet space. That includes reading a book, that includes taking a bubble bath, that includes kind of attuning to yourself and listening to what your body needs, because I think that that is very, sorry about that. I think that that is very much a part of spirituality as well, is getting to know yourself and loving yourself, because we were created in his image. Therefore, I believe that there's a lot of things that go into that with getting to know yourself and loving yourself as well. Self-care just doesn't have to be like a one size fit all, and being able to commune with the things that have been created for us and around us, such as nature and animals, is very, very important. And it's also something that allows us to explore deeper, even in the confounds of our mind, of how we were created, how we got here, and to just kind of bask in that and to revel in that and the beauty of how big that is, because it's much bigger than ourselves. And so I hope a lot of women push forward with kind of that mindset. Obviously, the normal things, yoga, those can become spiritual practices. Reading a book in your hammock on your deck can become a spiritual practice, because it depends on what you're reading and the content that you're consuming. So there's a lot of complexities that go into spirituality, but if we're going to skim the surface, that would be the things that I would suggest.
Okay, great. And I agree with you both 100%. So with spirituality though, clearly you all believe that it is extremely important to overall health, right? Agreed. But let me ask you this. Some people can take it a step further and say that it can actually help build or even define your character and who you are. Do you agree or disagree, and why?
I would say I agree. When our character is everything that, really it makes us trustworthy. It makes us who we are to other people, and how people can depend on us, how people look to us, how people feel about us when we're around them. Our character says a lot about us. And so when our character is based on things like what the Bible says, or what, if Liv brought up a thing about just even being made in his image. When we are made in our creator's image, we're like him. So, part of being emotional is part of being like God. All of these areas, our heart, soul, mind, our intelligence, all of these things come from the Lord in our lives, because he gives them to us. And so, just going back to who he is and being like him is where we get good character. And Psalms and different books of the Bible, Proverbs, talk about people with good character. And who doesn't want to be around somebody who's trustworthy, or who's generous or encouraging, and all of those things. And to be those things, then it comes from a good place within you. It comes from your heart. It comes from what makes you you. And so what comes out of your heart is what makes you who you are. So it's about what we put into ourselves as well. So, but I totally agree with a lot of what Dr. Liv said, because a lot of what we do, even what we read, what we put in us, where we go, what we do, that determines who we are and our character as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Liv, do you have anything to add to that, or a different perspective?
Yeah, I think especially in this day and time, there are so many sectors to spirituality, and there's so many sectors within religion as a whole. One thing that I think that most people can agree on is that the guiding principles are pretty much the same. So love people, be kind, treat people how you want to be treated. And I think lots of times spirituality as a whole, especially if you're someone that practices, is something that guides your moral character. 100%. It sets your moral compass. That the principles that you're practicing each day and you're implementing into your life are things that are essentially going to be the way that you are doing things throughout your day. That's how your routines are going to be set up. That's how the way you treat people is going to be set up. That's how, you are a parent is going to be set up. So your actual fabric of your being is definitely deeply rooted in the spiritual practices that you're choosing to practice in.
Great. Yes, and again, I agree. I was just curious of your all's take on that.
So that's just a great question. Especially, right now, times are, really difficult with, all of these different themes going on with climate change, with, this pandemic we're just coming out of and the trauma that's been left behind with that. And I think that there are a lot of people who are seeking and asking this very question. And from what I've witnessed in, kind of like being around people in the yogic community of my lineage and witnessing, different people coming in with their, histories, I see people, leaning towards this idea of finding a connection in community and finding that connection to, the spirit of the self. And I know many people who maybe don't believe in the traditional, Christian modality of God, who also pray, with a deep reverence for nature and for, Mother Earth, and a lot of people that I've met who spend time in, their yogic practice. It's like a devotional practice of, community and just the spirit of connecting to yourself and connecting to others can sometimes bring you that peace when you don't have that maybe traditional modality of Christianity that you're connected to, be it through yoga, through prayer in the spirit of nature, and just communion and connection with your community.
Okay, yeah. And do you also believe that the spirituality, what people believe and what they're putting out, what they're pulling in, defines you as a person, defines your character?
Absolutely. I have a, traditional, Christianity upbringing. I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, and that part of my history connected me to this kind of level of prayer and this desire to kind of seek and ask questions. And if I had not had that as a part of my background, it would be a whole different story of where I am, so I respect and appreciate so much the, potential that growing up in that community supported me in my own kind of, growth and expansion, and this, again, just self-inquiry. The more you study, the Bible, the more you study these kind of different texts left in other religions, be it Buddhism, you start to kind of really just want to understand this connection to the self, at least for me, and really know yourself and find that connection to a community that supports you and accepts you.
Right. And I believe it was Dr. Liv that mentioned that the different religions, there's so many different religions and practices out there, but they all still seem to have the basics. Be a good person, don't lie, don't cheat, don't be nasty to other people, put good out in the world and you'll receive good back, kind of thing. And that was one of the things I was going to ask was what other type of spiritual practices, or, like that we could do, positive spiritual practices. I mean, I know that you can go down a rabbit hole and get tied into some dark stuff. As a horror writer, I've actually even had to caution to break myself away from some people in some groups, because they were going too deep and dark, that I wasn't comfortable with that. Yes, I write horror, but I'm also a Christian at heart. So there's some things that I absolutely won't touch. There's some things I stay away from. I stay away from writing about possessions and stuff like that. So I do draw my own lines.
I spend a lot of time like talking about these kind of like ideas, but I guess like as far as practices go, just at the top of my head, finding some time in nature, sitting down and spending time, by a creek, or, this natural body of water, spending time, in meditation or prayer next to a tree, even if you have a tree in your yard, just getting outside and spending that time with Mother Earth. And then making self-care almost a prayer and a devotion to yourself. I like to use sesame oil, which is like a practice in Ayurveda for self-massage. And I really like massaging and almost, talking with this kind of like compassion and love for myself, like in massage. So bringing those self-care practices almost into like a devotion and a prayer, for yourself and your health.
That's interesting. I've not heard that before. You mentioned community and the positive, the different positive practices that are out there. Kind of was going to lead me to the next question of community. How do you find these communities? How do you find what works for you? How do you find your group of people? Anyone?
I think, especially right now, we are in a very different time. And what we're starting to see is what I like to call the rise of the divine feminine. And we are finding women that are literally smashing through the patriarchy. And we're finding women that are becoming in love with themselves and understanding that it's okay to be independent, and it's okay to love themselves, and it's okay to give themselves the things that we often neglect day in and day out. And something else that goes along with that is finding your tribe and finding other people that are like you. Now, because of technology, it becomes very simple, because you can Facebook group, you can Google, you can find a yoga class, and then I found this amazing group of women that become best friends for life. There's mom circles. I mean, the opportunity is endless. But as we're starting to see this very big change for women, it's allowing women to kind of come into this space where we do not have to remain in masculine energy all the time. I myself was one of those people, and I was in my masculine energy all of the time. It was literally ruining my relationship at home, because I would not allow myself to be soft. And the crazy thing is, I didn't allow myself to do that because of the childhood that I was brought up in and the way that I was raised. And it filtered over into my adult life, and it changed the way that I mothered. It changed the way that I was a friend. And one big, huge thing for me was with women specifically. I didn't have a lot of female relationships. I was usually in these circles with other women who were also hurt, and there was no level of understanding because they were also hurt and I was also hurt. I had to do a lot of inner work and a lot of shadow work in order to become the woman that I am today. And I attribute that to just finding other people that are my tribe. I deal with energy a lot, and I really believe that when you want that type of meaningful relationship with other women, such as this, those people gravitate towards you. Like you and I met basically just through, a group of other people, and look, here we are today. And it's like, I have been so blessed to have the opportunity to find other people this way. And so that might not be the practice for everyone. That might not be the way that it works for everyone. But in my experience, I have literally just said, okay, universe, I really want to have meaningful relationships with other women. I want to find other people that see the world the way that I do, even if they don't necessarily believe the same way. But we are into loving, we are into being kind, we are into caring for one another, and creating that tribal / village that so many of us lost within the last 20 to 30 years. I know there's a big, huge thing with, oh, it takes a village. Well, when we got to my generation, There was no village left. There was no one left to help me with my kids. There was no one left to pat me on my back. There was no one left to encourage me and lift me up. And so I made it a point to constantly encourage other women so that I would receive that back into my life. And so for me to answer that question, that's the way that I've been able to kind of manifest this in my life, is ask for it. And then when it comes to me, being open to receiving that type of love from other people around me.
Dr. Liv, I think you nailed it. I mean, that's exactly what I was searching for personally. But Stephanie, back to more of the religious part though, trying to find a church. And I was raised old school Pentecostal, so they were very, very strict, but I disagree with their dress codes. I believe a lot of churches are doing better with that now. However, going into more open, liberal thinking churches, to me, they have some things wrong. How do I find my church?
No, I agree. It's hard because the world is divided. So I mean, all you have to do is turn on the news and you see that the world is divided, and unfortunately that's coming into the church, and there are people at polar opposites of each other, and it's hard. It's a difficult thing. And I think that we want to love, we want to accept people, we want to reach out, we want to be kind, all of those things, but there's some people that don't let you be the person that you are. They just don't let you try to even be kind. And I'm not saying we don't be kind. It's just that it's when you do have that, when you feel like you're just having that pushing on you to whether it's about your beliefs, whether it's about who you are. And even as we've been talking, I mean, I luckily have been in church that allowed me to preach and teach and be who I am, because I know that I'm, where the Lord has gifted me is important to me. And it's important to my husband. My husband is very much supportive of me and the gifting that I have. So to kind of answer your question, I think we really need to do is be picky about the church we go into. I think everybody needs to be picky about the church they go into. Is there something for every age? Is there something for women? How does your pastor feel? How does that pastor feel about women? No woman wants to be in a church where she's just looked at like you're supposed to just obey everything everybody says, because you have no opinion. I'm reading a book that is actually about women in ministry, and she wrote when that she was in a Bible study that a woman had to write down the question and give it to her husband to ask. And no, I mean, Jesus revealed himself to women. He revealed that he was the Messiah first to a woman. He sent a woman into cities to proclaim the gospel. He treated women well. And if our pastors would treat women like the way Jesus did, we would see a lot of different churches. But I think it's finding that pastor, that board, that group who is in leadership, and finding out, who they are and what their beliefs are about women in ministry and women in the church. I just think that we need to update our belief systems and there are those belief systems in the Pentecost church, in the Baptist church, are very rooted in the King James version of the Bible, and King James was not a fan of women. So, even like Proverbs 31 that talks about a virtuous woman. I mean, that is actually more properly stated as a woman of strength. She's a strong woman who does all these things that he lists in Proverbs 31, because she is a godly woman who knows her strengths, who knows how to support her husband, who knows how to support her children, knows how to support those in the city gates, So she knows how to take care of herself, take care of her family, and take care of the people around her. And that's a strong person that can do that. And the last thing I'll say is it's, in the Bible, when it talks about when we're married, we're one. And when you're one, there's no one up here. You're one. And so there's no one telling you everything and lording over you, because we're to be one together as women, one in groups, one in marriage, one in relationships with other people. So I'm not saying that there's not an authority figure, but when you're really one, you're in fellowship together in the way that the Lord intended.
Hence, gather together in one accord. Can you, before you leave, let everybody know who you are again and how we can find you?
Right. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. So you can find me and my name is Pavlantos, and I spell that because it's a Greek last name, and most people don't spell it correctly or get it right, but it's a hard one. But anyway, if you go to just put in my name in Google, you'll find my website, you'll find my Bible studies, you'll find just about anything out that you need, because I tried to put my name on, on all my sites and all of that. So it's stephaniepavlantos.com.
My name is Olivia Hairston, and I am a board certified natural wellness practitioner hailing from Dunbar, West Virginia, and also an educator of functional medicine.
And I'm Bonnie Swan. I call myself the economist by day and yogi by night. So I'm trying to create this new area of research to support a potential nonprofit to get yoga into schools as a socio-emotional learning goal.
You can they'll be on this podcast, so you can just click on the see more and you can find all her links there as well.
It was nice meeting all of you ladies, so thank you very much.
My pleasure having you. Thank you so much. Perfect. Love you guys.